They say obedience is earned through respect, through kindness, through trust. But history whispers a darker truth. Kings, generals, and CEOs bend crowds with a single gesture, without lifting a sword or raising their voice. Look closely. One ruthless shift in tone, one unshakable command, and the room changes. Eyes lower, spines straighten, resistance melts into silence. This is the paradox no one wants to admit. Influence doesn't always take months of persuasion or endless charm. Sometimes, obedience can be demanded instantly. Not through reason, but through presence. Not through begging, but through dominance. And here lies the riddle that unsettles the soul. What is this hidden trick? How does one person flip the minds of many, forcing compliance without debate? You think power is gentle persuasion. But tonight, you'll discover the brutal truth. Obedience is born in shadows, and it bows instantly when summoned. We love to believe in a pleasant story about influence. The story goes like this. If you want to move people, you must be endlessly likable. You should smile at the right times, speak with warmth, earn trust, and gradually win someone over through charm and charisma. Bookshelves are lined with guides teaching exactly that. How to persuade step by step, how to build rapport, how to make others like you. Feels safe, feels fair. Influence, in this myth, is a slow dance of patience and personality. But reality is far less comfortable. True influence, the kind that bends wills and changes behavior instantly, rarely comes from endless persuasion. It comes from the moment of ruthless command. Manipulators, predators, and power-hungry leaders don't waste years learning how to be charming. They know that, in a single decisive move, they can override all resistance. They understand that obedience doesn't come from being liked. It comes from being positioned as someone who must be obeyed. Think of the difference between a salesman trying to convince you for an hour versus a general barking a single order on the battlefield. The salesman must beg for your attention, compete for your interest, and walk you slowly toward agreement. The general doesn't need your interest. His authority, timing, and environment compress the decision into one instant. Obey or face the consequence. One requires charm. The other requires command. This is the uncomfortable truth behind influence. Likability is a luxury, not a requirement. History shows that many of the most influential figures weren't necessarily likable. Dictators, cult leaders, and corporate sharks bent people to their will not because they smiled more, but because they knew how to strike when the moment was vulnerable. They acted with speed, certainty, and unapologetic force, before their targets had time to think. Slow persuasion feeds on your belief that you're in control, that you're choosing freely. Ruthless influence bypasses choice altogether. It operates in the split second when hesitation is impossible, when the cost of saying no feels too high, when social pressure is crushing, or when the manipulator has framed themselves as the only path forward. That's why predators don't argue. They issue commands disguised as inevitabilities. Sign here. Come with me. This is the only way. To see this clearly is to strip away the comforting myth. Influence isn't always a gentle process of winning hearts. Often, it's the brutal art of collapsing time, removing the space to think, to resist, to weigh options. Persuasion stretches out like a negotiation. Command compresses into a moment of surrender. One is built on charm. The other is built on power. And here lies the paradox. The world trains you to focus on likability, as if smiles and small talk are the keys to influence. But the predators already know it's not about endless persuasion. It's about the decisive strike that leaves no room for refusal. Influence is not the myth we want it to be. It's not soft. It's not slow. At its core, true influence is the ability to collapse hesitation and make obedience the only option. Machiavelli understood something that polite society tries to bury under illusions of morality and goodwill. People obey not because they want to, but because they must. Strip away the comforting lies of democracy, religion, or culture, and one brutal principle remains. The foundation of all power is necessity. In The Prince, he warned rulers not to confuse popularity with control. A crowd may cheer your name today, But if tomorrow they sense weakness, their loyalty evaporates like smoke. The hidden law is this: coercion trumps persuasion, fear outlasts love, and dominance is secured not by dialogue, but by certainty. Consider Cesare Borgia, the ruthless Italian nobleman Machiavelli admired. Borgia pacified rebellious regions not with endless negotiations, but by unleashing swift violence through his lieutenant, Ramiro de Orco. Once order was restored, Borgia theatrically executed his own lieutenant in a public square, presenting himself as both savior and executioner. The people did not obey him out of affection. They obeyed because they understood resistance meant death. Fear cemented certainty. Certainty bred stability. Contrast this with the downfall of King Louis XVI of France. He hesitated, debated, and trusted that the love of his people would shield him. But uncertainty is fatal in politics. Each wavering gesture, each attempt to reconcile opposing factions, only exposed weakness. The revolutionaries sensed they could defy him without consequence. And once the aura of fear was gone, so was the throne. Machiavelli's hidden law cuts through the moral pretenses of leadership. Humans are driven less by reason than by survival. A ruler who ensures survival through dominance is obeyed, even if hated. A ruler who seeks affection at the expense of control is destroyed, even if once adored. Notice how this law extends beyond kings and revolutions. In every hierarchy, corporations, armies, even families, the dynamic holds. The boss who hesitates, who endlessly seeks consensus, invites challenge. The boss who radiates certainty, backed by symbols of authority, whether a title, a uniform, or even the quiet confidence of body language, rarely needs to argue. Their presence alone dictates obedience. Machiavelli was not glorifying cruelty. He was exposing reality. Love is fickle. Debates never end. But fear, when blended with inevitability, creates a structure no one dares test. This is why empires, cults, and dynasties alike lean on ritual displays of dominance. Parades of soldiers, crowns of gold, executions, and oaths. These are not empty pageantries. They are psychological weapons, designed to remind subjects that resistance is both dangerous and futile. To internalize this law is to see through the lies of modern leadership seminars and self-help platitudes. People don't follow because you inspire them. They follow because they sense they have no better choice. The moment alternatives appear, affection evaporates. But certainty, backed by symbolic and practical dominance, leaves no cracks for alternatives to grow. Machiavelli's hidden law is the foundation stone upon which all others rest. Ignore it and you are overthrown. Master it and you can shape nations, organizations, or individuals with an invisible leash. The unspoken knowledge that they obey you because they must. Every culture, across every era of human history, has had its invisible lever, the instinct to obey when authority is signaled. This lever isn't taught in schools. It doesn't require words. It bypasses rational thought and goes straight to the nervous system. The moment someone perceives an unmistakable signal of dominance, compliance follows almost automatically. Think about it. When a military officer enters a room in full uniform, silence falls without anyone announcing it. When a CEO pauses mid-sentence during a board meeting, everyone else waits, breath held. When a teacher simply raises an eyebrow, a classroom goes still. None of these responses are chosen consciously. They happen because the human brain is primed to read authority signals and to yield. The trigger rests in microcues: tone, silence, status signals, posture. A voice that doesn't rise at the end of sentences, but lands firmly like a gavel, communicates finality. A pause that lingers just slightly longer than is socially comfortable forces others to lean into the silence, filling it with obedience. Posture that occupies space, shoulders open, movements economical, marks a body as dominant. Even clothing, badges, or symbols of rank serve as shortcuts. The brain doesn't question authority when the uniform already answers it. This lever is invisible because it doesn't depend on content. The same words spoken in a hesitant tone fall flat, while delivered with unshakable calm they become commands. The nervous system responds not to logic, but to certainty. Authority, in its purest form, is performance backed by conviction. The contrast between weak gestures and absolute signals is stark. Weak gestures scatter power. Fidgeting hands, shifting eyes, over-explaining, hedging with words like maybe or I think. These cues dilute presence. They tell the nervous system, this person is unsure. No submission required. Absolute signals, on the other hand, collapse all doubt. A leader who maintains eye contact without blinking too often, who uses silence as punctuation, and who signals decisions with a steady, unhurried tone leaves no room for challenge. The body language says, this is the order of reality. The reason people obey isn't mysterious, it's survival. For thousands of years, challenging visible dominance was costly. The tribe functioned because someone led and others followed. Our biology still carries that imprint. Subordinates scan for certainty, for someone whose signals tell them, I am the anchor here. When they find it, they yield, often gratefully. Mastering this lever requires ruthless self-awareness. You don't manufacture dominance with noise, you signal it with control. To command obedience, you don't add more gestures, you subtract. You strip away excess words, unnecessary motion, nervous tics. Authority rests in the weight of what is not done, what is not said. The invisible lever of power isn't about shouting louder or moving faster. It's about occupying silence, radiating certainty, and letting the nervous system of others do the rest. Those who wield it don't need to demand respect, they embody it. And in that embodiment lies the quiet, irresistible force that makes people obey before they've even had the chance to think. To understand how obedience unfolds in real time, think of it as a script the brain automatically runs when certain conditions are present. The process is not random. It's a precise choreography of tension, expectation, command, and compliance. Let's break it down step by step. Step 1. Create tension. Every act of obedience begins with unease. A pause, a silence, or an authoritative look builds psychological pressure. This moment of tension is like the hush that falls before a judge bangs the gavel in a courtroom. Everyone instinctively braces themselves. Tension signals to the brain. Pay attention, something important is about to happen. Neurologically, the amygdala activates, heightening alertness and making us hyperreceptive to cues from authority. Step 2. Break expectation. The next move is to disrupt the ordinary rhythm. In wolf packs, the alpha may suddenly snap or shift direction, catching the pack off guard. The disruption overrides autopilot behavior and places the leader at the center of attention. Similarly, in human interactions, an abrupt statement or decisive gesture fractures the flow. This jolt of unpredictability makes the brain seek stability, and the mind naturally turns to the figure who caused the disruption, the presumed authority, for guidance on what to do next. Step 3. Deliver the command with certainty. Here lies the turning point. Once attention is captured, the command must land with absolute confidence. No hesitation, no doubt. In military training, barked orders are sharp, fast, and unambiguous. The prefrontal cortex, the seat of rational analysis, has less time to interfere when instructions are crisp and delivered as if compliance is the only natural option. Certainty is contagious. When someone acts as though resistance is unthinkable, the brain mirrors that belief. Step 4. Offer no alternative. Compliance thrives when escape routes are cut off. Think of a courtroom again. When a judge issues a sentence, there's no negotiation in that moment, it's binding. In daily life, when an order is framed as the only viable path forward, the brain doesn't waste energy weighing other options. The psychology of authority thrives on narrowing choice until the command feels less like a suggestion and more like gravity. Unavoidable. Obedience is less about submission and more about neurological choreography. Create tension, disrupt expectations, deliver certainty, eliminate alternatives, and let the brain seek relief through compliance. It's not magic, it's biology playing out in real time. True fear doesn't always arrive in the form of a shout, a slammed fist, or an unhinged display of rage. Those things are noisy, chaotic, and strangely weak. People instinctively brace themselves against a storm, and shouting gives them something to resist. Panic breeds panic. When a voice cracks under anger, it exposes insecurity, desperation, and lack of control. And once fear looks desperate, people stop submitting and start testing boundaries. They see through the storm and realize that behind the noise, there's nothing solid holding it together. What terrifies far more is the opposite. A command delivered with calmness so steady it feels unshakable. No raised voice, no wasted movement, just composure, like stone covered in velvet. That kind of presence disarms because it leaves no opening to push back against. A calm voice doesn't flinch or stumble. It doesn't need to convince you through volume. It simply expects compliance, and that expectation weighs more heavily than any scream. There's a strange psychology at play here. Humans are wired to measure threats not by how loud they are, but by how certain they are. When someone screams at you, you hear the uncertainty, the emotional leak of someone trying to prove they're in control. But when someone looks at you without tension in their face and delivers a sharp directive with quiet authority, your mind fills the silence with danger. You start to wonder, if they don't need to raise their voice, what are they capable of? That uncertainty makes calmness feel ruthless, even predatory. Calm ruthlessness is the trick hidden in plain sight. It isn't about removing emotion entirely. It's about containing it, sharpening it, and wrapping it in stillness. Imagine a knife inside a silk sheath. The softness doesn't make the blade less lethal. It makes the contrast more frightening. When a calm presence gives a command, it signals absolute self-control, and self-control signals power. The calm person has already decided what will happen, and they won't waste energy proving it. Their lack of visible struggle becomes proof that resistance is futile. This is why panic breeds defiance, but calm dominance breeds submission. Panic invites challenge. It feels like a contest of wills where the weaker one cracks first. Calm dominance, however, doesn't invite a contest at all. It closes the door before the thought of defiance even enters. There is nothing to fight against because the calm person doesn't step into battle. They simply declare the outcome. The real secret is that calmness is a mask over inevitability. People submit not because they are shouted down, but because they sense there's no chaos to exploit, no weakness to lean against. Calmness in the face of conflict is terrifying because it implies preparation, precision, and consequence. It whispers, I don't need to lose my composure, because I already know how this ends. And that certainty, more than any display of rage, makes people bow. Obedience does not always need chains, whips, or threats of violence. More often, it is manufactured silently through symbols. A uniform can achieve what a gun cannot. A robe can enforce what a whip fails to sustain. Human beings are primed to read meaning into symbols, and once that meaning is established, logic collapses under the weight of perception. When a soldier wears camouflage, the cloth itself carries authority. When a judge dons a robe, the fabric transforms them into a vessel of law. The person beneath may be fallible, even weak, but the symbol shields them in an aura of power that demands compliance. Consider how quickly people adjust their behavior in front of someone wearing a police badge. Without a word spoken, bodies stiffen, speech softens, and hesitation creeps in. The badge bypasses the rational mind and taps into something primal, the need to submit to the emblem of order. The same happens with doctors in white coats, priests in ceremonial robes, executives behind polished desks. The symbols carry a weight greater than the individual, turning human beings into extensions of an institution. The robe, the badge, the silence in a boardroom, these are not ornaments. They are weapons disguised as decoration. Raw force dominates through fear, but it must be constantly reapplied. A soldier must stand over a captive, a tyrant must threaten his people daily, and the whip must always be within reach. Symbolic domination, however, lasts longer and spreads wider because it rewires perception. A general need not shoot his soldiers to ensure loyalty. The stripes on his shoulder are enough. A religious leader does not have to shout to command reverence. The ritual silence of the congregation maintains the hierarchy for him. Symbols turn obedience into reflex. Where brute force burns quickly, symbols embed themselves in culture, leaving scars on the collective imagination. Luxury serves the same purpose. Gold-plated pens, expensive suits, high-back chairs, all are signals designed to manufacture distance. They whisper, "I am above you." The effect is so powerful that entire industries thrive on selling symbolic authority. Corporations pour billions into logos, uniforms, and rituals that discipline employees without needing constant surveillance. A handshake in a marble office feels different than one in a grocery aisle, even if the same two hands are involved. It is the stagecraft of power that makes the gesture resonate. Symbols also weaponize silence. In a courtroom, everyone must rise when the judge enters. In boardrooms, silence amplifies authority. The quiet, the robe, the elevated seat, all converge to produce compliance. Force makes one obey under duress, but symbols make one obey willingly, sometimes even gratefully. The trick is not physical domination but psychological surrender. The more elaborate the symbols, the deeper the surrender. A crown studded with jewels commands more loyalty than a bare head ever could. In the end, force and symbols pursue the same end: submission. But force breaks bodies while symbols bend minds. One imprisons flesh, the other colonizes thought. True mastery lies not in the clenched fist but in the emblem that makes the fist unnecessary. That is the ritual of symbols, a quiet, persistent form of domination that people mistake for respect, reverence, or tradition, when in fact it is obedience by design. Imagine sitting across a negotiation table. One person leans forward, explaining their point, almost begging for agreement. "Would you mind if we tried this?" Their voice tilts upward, unsure. The other person simply states, "This is how we'll do it." The room shifts instantly. Certainty has gravity. People are drawn to whoever seems most convinced of their own position. That's the essence of turning the trick into a weapon. Mastering the art of commanding without asking, projecting authority without over-explaining, and using silence as a tool rather than a weakness. When you project certainty, you remove doubt not just from yourself but from the other person's mind. Humans are wired to seek confidence. If you act as though something is already decided, most people will fall in line. It works in business meetings when you present a plan as if it's the only viable option. It works in relationships when you lead with calm decisiveness instead of timid suggestions. It works in sales when you tell the client, "This package fits what you need," instead of nervously listing alternatives. Certainty doesn't leave cracks for negotiation. It creates the sense that there's only one road forward. Silence is another overlooked weapon. Weak communicators rush to fill gaps, stumbling over words, softening their position, or explaining too much. Ruthless communicators know silence unnerves. When you make a statement and stop talking, you place the burden of response on the other side. In negotiations, that pause forces the other person to reveal their doubts, insecurities, or concessions. In personal conversations, it magnifies your words, making them echo longer in the listener's head. Silence makes you look controlled, unbothered, and in charge. The one who is least afraid of silence usually holds the power. Commands are the third piece of the arsenal. Compare "Would you like to sit here?" with "sit here." The first opens space for hesitation, rejection, or delay. The second closes it. The key is not barking orders but delivering them as if they are the natural next step, inevitable and unquestionable. In business, instead of asking, "Do you want to set up another call?" say, "We'll meet next Tuesday to finalize." In relationships, instead of, "Do you want to go out tonight?" try, "We're going to dinner at 8. It's not arrogance. It's leadership. You remove decision fatigue for others and establish yourself as the one steering the ship. The weak approach is all about asking. Asking permission. Asking approval. Asking for reassurance. The ruthless approach is about commanding with calm authority, backed by silence and certainty. People rarely push back against someone who radiates conviction and acts like decisions are already made. The world bends to those who appear sure of themselves. The trick becomes a weapon when you stop seeking agreement and start assuming it. You don't wait for permission to lead. You act as though leadership was yours from the start. That shift is subtle, but once mastered, it changes how every interaction unfolds. It makes people follow, obey, and align without even realizing they've surrendered their choice. When the trick fails, it doesn't always end with drama. It often collapses silently, leaving the manipulator exposed in the most humiliating way possible. Every trick, no matter how clever, relies on one assumption: that others will accept the performance without testing it too hard. The mask of certainty, when worn with absolute confidence, can be a powerful shield. But the mask is fragile. One slip in tone, one hesitation in body language, or one contradiction in words, and the entire illusion crumbles. People are quick to forgive ignorance, but they rarely forgive the arrogance of false authority once revealed. The backlash is sharper precisely because the authority was built on smoke. Overuse is another danger. A trick that works once or twice often becomes addictive, tempting its wielder to lean on it as a shortcut instead of building real credibility. But repetition dulls its edge. Colleagues, subordinates, or rivals begin to notice the patterns. How the same forced certainty appears in different contexts. How the confidence doesn't match the depth of knowledge. How the silence of others isn't respect but weary tolerance. The more it is repeated, the more obvious the cracks become. Authority built on this crutch ends up hollow, propped up only by those who haven't yet bothered to test it. Once even a single person calls it out, others follow, and the illusion of dominance collapses faster than it was built. Equally dangerous is meeting someone who possesses the same or greater dominance. Confidence works on the unsure, but when two masks of certainty face each other, only one can hold. If the opponent has sharper composure, deeper knowledge, or stronger presence, the trickster is left not only defeated but exposed as an imitator. In this confrontation, the false mask doesn't just fail, it shatters, often with witnesses who will never look at the manipulator the same way again. This is why some of history's most cunning figures thrived only until they encountered someone who matched their aura. The trick is not a permanent crown but a temporary veil, effective only until it meets equal resistance. What this reveals is a deeper truth. Tricks can create obedience, but not loyalty. They can enforce silence, but not respect. A mask of certainty inspires compliance only so long as the mask holds, but true authority comes from balance, the mixture of confidence with substance, of presence with fairness. A leader who understands this does not overplay the trick but uses it sparingly, like a spark to ignite trust before building a steady fire. The goal is not reckless tyranny, where fear and false dominance keep others in line, but sustainable authority, where respect endures even when the mask slips. The difference between the two is stark. Fragile force dies the moment it is tested. Sustainable authority grows stronger with each challenge it survives. The lesson, then, is not to discard the trick entirely but to know its limits. Use it to open doors, to command attention in moments that require strength. But beyond the entrance lies the harder work of proving substance. Respect lasts longer than fear, and balance carries farther than bravado. The trick works only when it remains a tool, not when it becomes the foundation. Civilization is a stage draped in velvet, but beneath the fabric lies steel. People smile, laugh, shake hands, and flatter one another. Yet every gesture is measured, every word carries weight, and every silence is a test. What appears polite is merely ritual. What appears friendly is often theater. At its core, human life still runs on the same code it always has, the silent question of who bends and who does not. Obedience is not exchanged through logic, nor through lengthy arguments. It is signaled. A tilt of the head, a pause in speech, a refusal to fill the silence. These are commands written in the oldest language of power. Civilization disguises itself with manners, but the primal pulse of hierarchy has never left us. Even in boardrooms, even in dinner parties, even in casual encounters, there is always someone asserting and someone yielding. And here lies the final realization: the world does not reward the one who begs, nor the one who asks. It rewards the one who decides. To move without hesitation is to teach others the rhythm they must follow. To stand without apology is to make others rearrange themselves in your orbit. You need not raise your voice. You need not explain. You need only embody certainty, and people will bend. Think of the moments when the air shifted because someone walked into a room with no hurry and no fear. They did not request permission. They declared presence. That is the art of princely dominance. Not arrogance, not loudness, but inevitability. The unspoken contract is clear. When you refuse to kneel, the world unconsciously kneels to you. This is the secret that lies buried beneath the layers of etiquette and law. Civilization survives because most people do not see it, and because a few do. Those few move society like hidden hands on invisible strings. They do not explain themselves. They do not justify. They decide, and others obey without realizing why. The final step, then, is not to learn another trick but to embody a shift. The shift from asking to deciding, from waiting to declaring, from apologizing to owning. You are no longer the guest in other people's halls. You are the prince within them. And when you accept this, something remarkable happens. The world bends almost effortlessly. Conversations flow in your direction. Obstacles yield. People fall into alignment as though they had been waiting for you to command them all along. This is not magic, though it feels like it. It is the natural response of humans to certainty, the ruthless gravity of one who knows they will not bow. So remember, you do not beg. You do not ask. You decide. And the world, like iron shavings to a magnet, rearranges itself around you. The mask of civility may remain, the rituals may continue, but you now hold the script beneath the script. And with it, you become more than an actor in the play of power, you become its author.